So assuming the entire outside is refined as much as possible, the inside is as much as possible, we're gonna come back to the rim. Now, one of the first things I wanna do is check for thickness. Because this is slab, it's gonna be pretty consistent, but sometimes those areas where we had an overlap or a seam might be a little thicker, so just look for that, and if you see it, just trim that down a little bit. But what I wanna think about now is rim design. These are meant to be functional bowls, so the rim isn't gonna be fancy, but what I don't wanna have is what looks like this, a cut slab. It looks unfinished. It looks like a slab and we just cut it because, well, that's what we did. I like to cut it on an angle like this, but an easier way rather than cutting again, because that can be a tricky operation, is to use that rasp. You wanna run that through on a consistent angle while turning. And you're just taking away a little bit of the clay off that outside corner. And you're just trying to do it really consistent. This is where the banding wheel is really helpful because I can park my arms in a consistent position and just turn this. And I'm just looking as carefully as possible. We can get this very precise, but this is not a factory-made object. It is still handmade. We're still gonna see some subtle variation, and that's okay. We're gonna just embrace that. It's part of a handmade object. Now, once you've done that, get any of the little shavings and stuff out of there because they can stick to the clay. Condense them into a smaller pile so they're not gonna make a dusty mess. So clean up a little bit. All right, that still doesn't look great, so I'm gonna just use fingers to wipe off any burrs. And the next step I wanna use is my sponge. So I'm gonna get my sponge nice and wet, but squeeze out all the water. And I'm gonna position it between two fingers, like that. And I'm gonna run my hand across the rim in a very repetitive motion as I turn the banding wheel. Now, if your clay is soft, you might need less water. If your clay is drier, you might have to rehydrate. What I don't want is slimy, wet clay. So this is first taking down the initial sharpness. And after you do that for a bit, follow up with fingertips. Just smoothing, pinch smoothing, and slowly you'll work it out till you have a nice looking finished rim, nice and simple, but your goal is to get it as consistent as possible all the way around. After that, it's a good idea to maybe put it back in here, make sure you have your plastic in there, just to make sure we haven't distorted or ovaled out our form. And then in a bit, I'll show you how to do the foot. Now what I'm gonna do is get this onto the banding wheel perfectly. I'm gonna get this on here perfectly centered. First just do it by looks, then spin it. Position yourself so you can put your thumbs like this. Oh, I got it right on the first try. Shoot. Anyway, hopefully that happens to you too. This is an example of a bowl with a continuous curve though. It has to have a foot. This can't sit on a table because it'll just wobble. Where does the foot ring go? You don't want too small of a diameter or it'll be wobbly. Too wide won't work well and it won't fit aesthetically. Generally you want it just inside of the curve from floor to wall. Look at this store-bought bowl. See how it curves more wall, floor. The foot ring's kind of around that transition. Okay, somewhere around there is where it goes. So now that it's on here, I'm going to use this and then I'm going to mark a line. See how that looks. I think that looks like a good spot for my foot ring. If you did it too small, just put your foot on the outside of it. If it's too big, put it on the inside. Now I'm gonna score that right on the line in my case. Slip. I don't need to score the strip of clay because I just made it and just cut it. It's fresh. You only have to score both parts if they're leather hard, okay? This was leather hard, so that's why I scored that part. Okay, there it is. Now I'm gonna get my strip of clay, and whichever edge looks better, because of the curve of the bowl, it's already going to be angled out slightly. And what you gotta do is you have to overlap it, like this. Now look close a second, look close. If I cut it like this, that right there, That's called a butt joint. It's a 90-degree cut. This piece butts up against that piece. That is liable to crack. What is better is instead a diagonal 45-degree cut. Do you see how that ended up being a longer line? So there's more surface area for adhesion. Plus, since it overlaps, you don't have a crack that would go from inside to out. So it's going through both layers of clay. I'm gonna cut straight down to the bowl, take off the extra, take that out, and get this into place. Join it together, smooth it together. Now there may be some inconsistency, so the next thing is I want to make sure my bowl is still centered and I want to look. I want to adjust as needed so this is fitting on there nicely. If you feel like you didn't quite get enough slip, get more in the little gap there. And then you're just going to slowly start to work it into the clay. Okay, now I need to do a little bit of blending before I can shape this. I want to start on the outside. Do you see where it transitions from foot to bowl? There's a little crack there. I need to try to seal that crack. So to do that, there's a lot of different ways. You could use like a Sharpie or something. This kind of curve might fit in there. I'm gonna use my little wooden stick, maybe your plastic modeling tool. But I'm gonna just run this in there, in that little gap, as a way to try to seal it so that I don't have that crack there anymore. And having the banding wheel spinning around can really help you do that. So I'm bracing my hand with my other hand. Now this is a technique a lot more like throwing on the pottery wheel. Let's see if we got that crack. See how that sealed that gap now? There's not a visible crack anymore. Now I can do the same on the inside. I want to be more gentle though. And I'm finding I have to adjust my angle a little bit. There we go. And since I had enough slip there, that really helped me. Now I'm going to switch to my sponge. I want to get that wet, but squeeze out the water. This is where if you have a partner to spin this for you, you can, or you can give it just a really good spin, but make sure this isn't going to go flying off. If your bowl keeps sliding around, you could put little chunks of clay here and here to hold it in place. But I'm holding my damp sponge like this and just getting it to spin around and around. I can also use slightly wet fingertips to kind of shape it while it spins. You could have somebody spin this for you while you're doing it. This is what we would do on a pottery wheel. So that's just the basic joinery. You can see how I'm getting that sort of desired foot shape. It's beveled. However, I have a sharp edge on the inside. So you notice my joined area is still not quite perfect. So I'm gonna spend more time here just smoothing with my sponge or fingers. And I wanna get it as perfectly consistent as possible. Then I can come back and refine the shape. But if I get in here and try to pinch or carve, it's too soft. So then what we'll do is we'll wrap this up again. And this is very soft. That is kind of dry. After wrapping it at least overnight, it will sort of equalize. And then it'll be easier to work with into our final refinements. Now, the next thing you want to look at is the foot height relative to the height of the bowl. Are you happy with that height? That's a personal aesthetic judgment that you can make. The other one, as I mentioned, the thickness of the rim, the thickness of the foot should relate to the thickness of the rim of your bowl. In order to flip this over safely, if I grab it like this, I might run the risk of like warping it. So if you have trouble flipping it, it's better to do sandwich method. So you get your hand under the project board and flip it over like that. And then you can more gently set it down. So I can see that my rim statement is similar. Some of the things I want to do is touch up my rim because I've been working on this and wrapping and unwrapping. I'm looking for any inconsistencies and taking care of them inside and out. But to finish the foot, here's what must be done. Because we hand built this foot ring, it might not be perfect. It might be kind of uneven. So you're gonna find a block of wood that's nice and smooth. You're gonna lay it right on top. And what you're gonna look for is you're gonna look and see right exactly at eye level if there are any gaps. If there are, that's a low point. So you can shave down high points so it sits really level. And it's soft enough where I can put a little tiny bit of gentle compression on here. I don't want to like smush my bowl, okay? Just a little bit. And then once you've done that, you can get this upright. And again, very carefully, we don't want to let this thing warp. And you get it perfectly centered again on that banding wheel. And with it turning, look for consistency on the foot, on the wall, and the rim. The final thing to look at, other than those smoothing checks, the foot itself should not be completely flat. If this is flat right there, that means I have a corner here and an inside corner there. Those are spots that will chip. Anytime I pick up or put this down on a countertop or on a shelf, those sharp edges would touch first. So what I want to do is either just use fingers and just gently soften the outside corner and inside corner. That's really it, usually. If your clay is a little more firm, you might have to use a knife or a ribbon tool to shave those down. It's called a bevel. A bevel is when you angle off a corner of something. So you just want to create a gentle inside and outside bevel and get it really consistent. And that's pretty much it. After you're done, typically we're going to sign it down here on the bottom. Now, depending on your foot depth, this could get glazed later, or we could leave this bare clay in the glazing process. So if that matters to you design-wise, your foot ring needs to be at least 1/4 of an inch above the center point. If so, that's enough depth to glaze this part. If you don't care or don't want it glazed, then it doesn't matter as much as long as your bowl sits upright, nice and even. So that's it, okay?